Katto, the Complicated, by Eihei Dogen. From Shobogenzo, the Treasury of the True Dharma Eye. The experience and the transmission, in the order on Vulture Peak, of Shakyamuni Buddha's right Dharma Eye treasury and supreme truth of Bodhi belongs only to the great master Maha Kasyapa. Authentically experienced in the transmission from rightful successor to rightful successor, it arrives at the 28th Patriarch, the Venerable Bodhidharma. The Venerable One demonstrates in China the behavior of a patriarch and transmits the right Dharma Eye treasury and the supreme truth of Bodhi to Great Master Taiso Shoshu Fukaku, making him the second patriarch. We call the 28th patriarch as the first in China to possess the behavior of a patriarch, the first patriarch, and we call the 29th patriarch the second patriarch. This is the custom in the Eastern lands. The first patriarch, under the Venerable Prajnatara in the past, has directly experienced and has received the direct transmission of the Buddha's instruction and the bones of the truth. Using the original root, he has experienced the original root and made this into a base for branches and leaves. In general, although sacred beings all aim to learn the cutting of the roots of the complicated, they do not learn that cutting means cutting the complicated with the complicated, and they do not know that the complicated is entwined with the complicated. How much less could they know that the succession of the complicated continues by means of the complicated? Few have known that the succession of the Dharma is the complicated itself. No one has heard so. No one has said so. Could many have realized so in experience? My late master, the eternal Buddha, says, a bottle gourd entwines with a bottle gourd. This preaching has been neither seen nor heard in the orders in all directions of masters of all the ages. It has been preached by my late master for the first time, and by him alone. Bottle gourd vines intertwining with bottle gourd vines is Buddhist patriarchs investigating the state of Buddhist patriarchs, and is Buddhist patriarchs experiencing the exact same state of Buddhist patriarchs. It is the state, for example, of the mind being transmitted by the mind. The 28th Patriarch says to his disciples, "The time is approaching. Why don't you say what you have got?" Then the disciple Dofuku says, "My view now is, without being attached to words or being detached from words, to perform the function of the truth." The Patriarch says, "You have got my skin." The nun Soji says, "My understanding now is like that of Ananda seeing the land of Akshobhya Buddha. Seen once, it is not seen again." The Patriarch says, "You have got my flesh." The disciple Do-iku says, "The four elements are originally bare. The five aggregates are not existence. My viewpoint is that there is nothing to be got." The Patriarch says, "You have got my bones." Finally, Eka does 3 prostrations and then stands at his place. The Patriarch says, "You have got my marrow." Consequently, he makes Eka the second Patriarch, transmitting the Dharma and transmitting the robe. Now, learn in practice the first Patriarch's words. "You have got my skin, flesh, bones, and marrow," are the Patriarch's words. The 4 disciples each possess what they have got and what they have heard. Both what they have heard and what they have got are skin, flesh, bones and marrow that spring out of body and mind. And skin, flesh, bones and marrow, which drop away body and mind. We cannot see and hear the ancestral master only by means of knowledge and understanding, which are but one move in a Go game. Not 100% realization of subject and object, that and this. Nevertheless, people who have not received the authentic transmission think that there are degrees of intimacy in the understanding of each of the 4 disciples. And so the Patriarch also expresses differences of profundity between skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. People say that the second Patriarch has received certification of getting the marrow because his understanding is superior. People who talk like this have never experienced learning and practice under the Buddhist patriarchs, and have never received the authentic transmission of the patriarch's truth. Remember, the patriarch's skin, flesh, bones and marrow are beyond shallowness and depth. Even if there is superiority and inferiority in understanding, the patriarch's words are only about getting me. The point here is that the expression, "You have got my marrow," and the expression, "You have got my bones," are both beyond sufficiency and insufficiency, whether in teaching people or in receiving people, whether in picking up weeds or falling into grass. The patriarch's expressions, for example, are like picking up a flower and like transmitting the robe. What the patriarch expresses for the 4 disciples is from the beginning utterly the same. The patriarch's expression is utterly consistent, but this does not necessarily mean that the 4 understandings are the same. Though the 4 understandings are individual and distinct, the patriarch's expression is just the patriarch's expression. Generally, speech and understanding cannot always be entrusted to each other. When the ancestral master addresses each of the disciples, he is saying, for example, "You have got me as my skin." If there were hundreds of thousands of disciples after the second patriarch, there would have been hundreds of thousands of expressions. There would be no limit. There are only 4 disciples, and so there are only the 4 expressions of skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. But there are many possible expressions left unexpressed. Remember, even in addressing the second patriarch, he could say, "You have got my skin." Even if the expression were, "You have got my skin," the first patriarch would be transmitting the right Dharma eye treasury to Eka as the second patriarch. Getting skin or getting marrow does not rely on superiority or inferiority. Again, in addressing Dofuku, Doiku, Soji, or others, he could say, "You have got my marrow." even if they are my skin, he must transmit the Dharma to them. Consider the body-mind of the ancestral master. His skin, flesh, bones and marrow are each the ancestral master himself. It is never the case that marrow is close and skin is distant. Now when the one who is equipped with the eyes of learning in practice receives certification that you have got my skin, there is the ancestral master, whose thoroughly realized body is flesh. There is the ancestral master, whose thoroughly realized body is bones. There is the ancestral master, whose thoroughly realized body is marrow. There is the ancestral master, whose thoroughly realized body is mind. There is the ancestral master, whose thoroughly realized mind is mind. There is the ancestral master, who is the thoroughly realized ancestral master. There is the ancestral master, whose thoroughly realized body gets me and you, and so on. If these ancestral masters manifest themselves together and address hundreds of thousands of disciples, they will say, as now, you have got my skin. The hundreds of thousands of expressions will be the skin, flesh, bones and marrow, but onlookers will excitedly consider them without reason to be expressions about skin, flesh, bones and marrow. If there were 6 or 7 disciples in the ancestral master's order, he might say, you have got my mind. He might say, you have got my state of Buddha. He might say, you have got my eyes. And he might say, you have got my real experience. As regards you, there are times when it is the patriarch, and there are times when it is Eka. We should also investigate in detail the truth of having got. Remember, there are cases of you have got me, and there are cases of I have got you. There are cases in which getting me is you, and there are cases in which getting you is me. If, When we research the body-mind of the ancestral master, we say that inside and outside cannot be oneness, or that the whole body cannot be the thoroughly realized body. We are not in the real land of Buddhist patriarchs. To have got the skin is to have got the bones, the flesh, and the marrow. To have got the bones, the flesh, and the marrow is to have got the skin, the flesh, and the countenance. How could this state only be the clear understanding that the whole universe in 10 directions is the real body? It is utterly the skin, flesh, bones and marrow themselves. For this reason, it is getting my robes, and you have got the Dharma. On this basis, even the speaking of words is individual instances of the springing out in which master and disciple experience the same state. And even the action of listening is individual instances of the springing out in which master and disciple experience the same state. Investigation of the same state by master and disciple is the entanglement of Buddhist patriarchs. The entangled state of Buddhist patriarchs is the lifeblood of their skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. The picking up of a flower and the winking of an eye are entanglement itself, and a face breaking into a smile is the skin, the flesh, the bones, and the marrow themselves. We should investigate further. In the seed of entanglement, the potential exists here and now to lay bare the substance, and it is by virtue of this that there are stems, leaves, flowers and fruits entwining in the entangled. Because these real stems, leaves, flowers and fruits are beyond complicatedness and uncomplicatedness. Buddhist patriarchs are realized, and the universe is realized. Great Master Shinsei of Joshu preaches to the assembly. Mahakashyapa gave the transmission to Ananda. Say then, Bodhidharma gave the transmission to what person? Then a monk asks, How about the second patriarch who got the marrow? The Master says, do not insult the second patriarch. On another occasion, the Master says, in Bodhidharma's words, someone who is outside gets the skin, and someone who is inside gets the bones. Say then, someone who is still further inside gets what? A monk asks, what does it mean to have got the marrow? The Master says, just be aware of the skin. The old monk, here and now, does not even broach the subject of marrow. The monk asks, but what is the marrow? The Master says, if you are like that, you cannot grope even for the skin. So remember, when we cannot grope for the skin, we cannot grope for the marrow. And when groping gets the skin, it also gets the marrow. We should consider the truth of being like that, unable to grope even for the skin. When the monk asks, what does it mean to have got the marrow? The expression, just be aware of the skin. The old monk, here and now, does not even broach the subject of marrow, is realized. In being aware of the skin, not even broaching the subject of marrow, is the real meaning of having got the marrow. On this basis, the question, how about the second patriarch who got the marrow, has been realized. When we reflect exactly the moment in which Mahakashyapa gives the transmission to Ananda, Ananda is concealing his body in Mahakashyapa, and Mahakashyapa is concealing his body in Ananda. At the same time, in the moment of their meeting within the transmission, they are not beyond the sphere of concrete actions that change the countenance and change the skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. On this basis, Joshu preaches, say then, Bodhidharma gives the transmission to what person? When Bodhidharma is giving the transmission, he is Bodhidharma. And when the second patriarch is getting the marrow, he is Bodhidharma. Relying on investigation of this truth, the Buddha Dharma has remained the Buddha Dharma to the present day. If it were otherwise, the Buddha Dharma could not reach the present. Quietly endeavouring to master this principle, we should express it ourselves and should cause others to express it. Someone who is outside gets the skin, and someone who is inside gets the bones. Say then, someone who is still further inside gets what? The meaning of the outside expressed now, and of the inside expressed now, should be extremely straight and direct. When we are discussing outside, skin, flesh, bones, and marrow each have an inside. This being so, the 4 Bodhidharmas have each mastered, instance by instance, the ascendant state of hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands of skins, of fleshes, of bones, and of marrows. Do not think that there can be no state ascendant to the marrow. There are further concrete states of ascendance, numbering 3 or 5. What the eternal Buddha Joshu has now preached to the assembly is the Buddha's truth. It is beyond others, such as Rinzai, Tokuzan, Dai, and Unmon. They have never dreamt of it. How much less could they express it? The unreliable old veterans of recent times do not even know that it exists. And if we told them of it, they might be astonished and afraid. Zen Master Secho Myokaku says, the 2 shoes, Joshu and Bokushu, are eternal Buddhas. So the eternal Buddha's words are evidence of the Buddha Dharma and are a past expression of the Self. Great Master Seppu Shinkaku says, the eternal Buddha, Joshu. A former Buddhist patriarch has eulogized him with the eulogy, Eternal Buddha, and a later Buddhist patriarch has also eulogized him with the eulogy, Eternal Buddha. Clearly, in that which is ascendant to the past and present, Joshu is a transcendent, eternal Buddha. In sum, the truth that skin, flesh, bones and marrow are entangled is the standard for the state of you have got me, which is preached by eternal Buddhas. We should endeavour to master this criterion. Furthermore, Some say that the first patriarch has returned to the West, but we learn that this is wrong. What So-un saw may not have been real. How could So-un see the leaving and coming of the ancestral master? The true study is just to learn that after the ancestral master passed away, his ashes were deposited on Yuji-san Mountain. Preached to the assembly at Kannon-dori Kosho Horinji Temple in the Uji district of Yoshu on the 7th day of the 7th lunar month in the first year of Kangen.